Jim Welninski here for ON1. Today we're going to have some fun with light. I've been accused of having no morals when it comes to my photography because so often what my final images look like bear little or no resemblance to what came out of the camera. And that's because I consider myself primarily an artist and I just happen to work with the camera. I always have an idea of what it is that I'm trying to do, and then I typically go out and make a piece of work about it. I think that art has to come from inside you, and if it comes from inside me, that means that the scene that's in front of me is really just raw material for completing a piece of work about the experience that I had when I shot the whatever it is that I'm shooting. So in this case, it's a piece of architecture that's in Chicago. This is the Hotel Sofitel, and this is the side of the building. If you ever have an opportunity to visit this building, it's really an awesome building. It's very unique. It's got a pointed spire out in the front. But I chose to shoot it from the side because I really like the contrast between the different types of architecture. Kind of traditional Chicago-style architecture on the right here. And over here is probably something that was built in the 70s, I'm guessing. It's that kind of postmodern architecture. And then this kind of hyper-modern structure in the middle. And I really like the way that the facade of this building reflects the sky, and we're going to have some fun relighting this thing. So I've provided a PSD file for you, and the PSD file has these two layers in it, and the two layers are identical, except one has a mask on it. And the reason I'm providing you the mask is because it took me a while to make it, and this isn't really a video about masking. This is a video about relighting. I'll show you really quickly how I made the initial pass at the mask, and I'm not going to bore you with all of the retouching stuff. We'll save that for another video when we have a lot of time to get into that kind of thing. So this layer is off right now. I'm going to just do this on the original layer here. And really the best way to make a mask like this is to just grab the quick mask tool and just make a pass on the sky and on the foliage over here, and let Photo RAW do its thing. And you're going to see that it does a pretty darn good job of creating a mask. A little bit of edge problem up here, stuff that needs to be retouched. This is easily fixed just by going to the mask view and grabbing the brush and making sure that the perfect brush isn't on. I'm going to use a really hard brush here. And we can even increase the size of the brush. And we're going to paint in, because we want to paint with white, and just go in and paint this stuff in. And even this is a pretty good mask. If I was doing landscape work, this would probably be good enough. But for architectural work, these edges up here are really important. And you have a bunch of tools that you can use to retouch this mask. The refined brush is great. You could make another pass at this with the perfect brush, and that would probably do it. But again, this isn't a masking video, so I'm not going to bore you with the details of that. I'm sure I'll get some comments on this saying, hey, why didn't you show us how to make the mask? And I promise that we'll revisit that. So I'm going to delete this mask by resetting it and turn this top layer back on. Go back out of my mask view, and we're going to use the mask that we have. And again, I've provided this mask for you. And it works really well with this image. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to convert this image to black and white. And then we're going to relight it using some gradients and some fancy lighting techniques. And then we're going to add some color back into it and finish it off. When I say fancy lighting techniques, I'm really kidding, because typically the tools that I use are really simple. It's the application of the tools. It's a little more sophisticated. And a little more thought has gone into that. But even when I'm teaching, I'm not using sophisticated tools, difficult tools to use. It's just learning how to use things in a creative way. And again, since I'm an artist first, that's what I care about. It has nothing to do with how great your tools are. It's what your interpretation as an artist and what you bring to the table with your vision. That's what's going to make your work stand out. So let's move on. So let's make a stamp of the work that we have now. And I could just as easily have made a copy of this bottom layer. It's really the same thing. And I'm going to create a smart layer here by right-clicking on the layer and choosing Convert to Smart Layer. And the reason I'm converting this to Smart Layer is because I'm going to go over into Effects now, and I may want to come back later and re-edit this because my initial conversion is going to be simple. So over into Effects, and we're going to add a filter. Now, I'm going to open up this panel on the left. You have all these presets in here that you can choose from. And don't be afraid to go through and start to fool around with some of these presets, black and white presets. A lot of the other gurus have spent a ton of time providing you with some really awesome resources over here. I'm not going to use these today, so I'm just going to close that panel by clicking on that double arrow down there so that our workspace is nice and neat. I'm going to come over and click the Add Filter button, and I'm going to select a black and white filter. And again, we can zoom through all these presets if we want. I know which preset I want to use for this. I'm going to click on this arrow and just choose blue. And I like it because it allows me to maintain some contrast in here between the sky, some separation between the sky and the architecture. So now I'm going to do something that's a little counterintuitive. I'm going to add a tone enhancer. And I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so we can see what's going on. What I'm really interested in are the shapes and not so much the texture. I don't want all of these rain marks to stand out so much in my building. So I'm going to reduce some of the detail in here. And the way I'm going to do that is by removing some of the detail by sliding the detail slider over to the left. Now, if I go too far, you can see what happens. I get this weird kind of impressionistic effect. That's not what I want at all. I just want to reduce the detail a little bit, and I'm going to pump up the clarity just a touch to bring some of that mid-tone contrast back. So it's a subtle effect, but it kind of smooths my building out, and that's really what I want. We're going to re-add some contrast later, but this is what I want for now. So I'm going to click Done. And we're going to end up back in Effects, or back in Layers. Layers, Effects, Effects, Layers. So here's my master black and white layer, and I'm going to call it that. Master BW. Perfect. And I'm going to make a copy of this, because now I'm going to work on my sky. I want to do something with the sky here. What I really want to do is darken this up, maybe add a little contrast to it. And in order to do that, I don't want to get confused with the filters that I've already put on here. I'm going to bake these changes in by simplifying the layer, and then I'm going to make it a smart layer again. So when I go over into Effects now, the black and white layer and the tone enhancer that I did are already baked into this, and my filter stack is clear. So I'm going to go into my filter stack and add a filter, and we're going to grab a tone enhancer, and I'm really interested in the curve. I'm interested in what's down here. So I'm going to pull this curve down, and I'm going to darken this pretty substantially. I'm going to pull these highlights down. These are my highlights. These are my shadows over on the left. And I'm going to leave the shadows in the corner, just pull my highlights down a little bit, and I want to darken that sky. And I might add a little bit of highlight, but I don't want pure white. That's why I'm not going to bring the curve back up into the right corner there. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm liking that. We're going to start there. Again, it's a smart layer, so I can always come back and edit this. So I'm going to hit Done. And once again, we're going to find ourselves back in Layers. So I only want this on my sky. Fortunately, I've got this handy dandy little mask here. And by the way, usually what I like to do with my masks is I like to keep them on a separate layer. Because frankly, I don't know about you, but I don't trust the clipboard. I've lost too many things on the clipboard. I go back looking for something and it's gone because usually it's probably user error. I accidentally erase it. So I'm going to double click on the name here and just call this mask and drag it to the bottom of my layer stack and turn it off because I don't need it. It's just a placeholder really for the mask. I'm going to right click on the mask and I'm going to copy it. And this is my sky layer now at the top. This is the layer we just made. I'm Let's rename it sky. And I need to be able to copy the mask here. And in order to copy the mask, I have to have a mask here in the first place. There is a mask here. It's white, but we can't see it, and I need to see it. So I'm going to go up into the mask menu and select invert mask, and it's going to put a black mask there. And now I can right-click on it and paste the mask that I have. Now, this is backwards. White reveals, black conceals. So white is revealing the darkening adjustment that I did, but it's revealing it on the building. So I need to invert this mask so that the sky is what's being affected. So I'm going to right-click and hit invert. And if I turn that on and off, you can see that that's only affecting my sky. Perfect. Exactly what I want. Okay, let's have some fun now and relight this building. So I'm going to go back to my master black and white layer and make a copy. And once again, I'm going to bake these changes in by simplifying the smart layer. And I'm going to turn it into a smart layer again. And let's rename this dark, because that's what we're going to do to it. So I got a smart layer named dark. That's essentially my master black and white layer. And I'm going to head over into effects. And I'm going to add a new filter by clicking on the add filter button. And we're going to select the tone enhancer. And we've got all these cool sliders here. But again, really what I'm interested in is the curve. And I like the curve because I'm going to darken this. And it darkens it in a kind of a logarithmic way. I'm going to darken this substantially. And I can always come back and lighten this up. Or more likely what we're going to end up doing is painting some of these details back in. So that looks pretty good. That's all I'm going to do to this. I'm going to hit done. And we're going to get kicked out back into layers. So here's my dark layer. And you can see that now it's only affecting my building. And it's only affecting my building because my sky layer is on the top. And I've got that masked off. So I'm going to leave this on. And I'm going to go and grab my masking bug. And I'm going to make sure that my gradient is selected. And I'm going to make sure linear top is selected. And we're going to reveal this dark only on the bottom of the photo. So I'm just going to click. And I want to tilt this a little bit and make it a little bit wider. Just like that. I'm not going to get too crazy here because we can always go back and edit this, right? That looks pretty nice. That's exactly what I want. So if I click off that layer, now I can turn it on and off. You can see it's only affecting my building. Perfect. So let's put some light now on the building. I'm going to make another copy of my master black and white layer. And once again, I'm going to bake these changes in by simplifying it. And then I'm going to reconvert it to a smart layer because I'm going to go back into effects in a second. But first, I'm going to rename this light because that's what we're going to do. I'm going to drag this to the top. Well, not to the top, but on top of dark. And we're going to go in and make some adjustments to this. And then we're going to have to get kind of crafty about how this gets applied. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So I'm going to go into the effects module. And once again, select the tone enhancer. And once again, I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom left here and twirl that arrow down and reveal my curve. Now I want to make this lighter because I want a streak of light coming across this way from upper left to lower right. So I'm just going to pump this up pretty good. And I want to bring some clarity into here. I want to start to see some of those lines. Good. And I might pull my shadows back a little bit. No, I think I'm just going to leave them. Well, maybe we'll pull them back a little bit. I can always come back and edit this if I want. And I'm going to say done. That's pretty good. And here we are back in layers. So now I need to figure out how in the heck I'm going to get this across my building. I tried to do this with two regular linear gradients, one on the bottom and one on the top, and I didn't like the way it looked. Didn't like it at all. So we're going to use a reflected gradient, and we're going to have to be sneaky here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my gradient tool, and I'm going to go up to my shape menu and choose reflected gradient. Now, what a reflected gradient is it's a gradient where the change happens from the middle out as opposed to from the bottom up or from the top down. So the middle of the gradient is the bright or dark part, and then it fades on either side. You'll see what I mean as soon as I click. So you can see that the dark part of my gradient's in the center, and then it fades out on either the top or the bottom. Now, obviously, this isn't what I want, because I want a beam of light kind of moving across my building. And when I put this gradient down, it darkens the center of the layer, and that's not what I want. The center of the gradient, I don't want to be dark. So I'm going to have to position this the way I want it, which is like this. I want this coming down across my building. Kind of want to hit that corner and then come down across this way. Now I got to be sure that this is what I want. I got a nice fade, because once I invert this, I can't get back to my my gradient bug. So I'm going to click or right click on here and click invert. And that's what we end up with, which is exactly what I want. And that looks pretty cool. So what I got to do is paint some of this stuff out, because I wouldn't expect light to behave like this, particularly this middle area. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here just by hitting Control or Command and then my plus or minus keys. Might zoom in a little more. There we go. I'm just going to move this into the center of my screen. And I've got this layer highlighted. Now I'm going to select my brush. And what I want is a brush that's feathered at about, 25 looks about pretty good, because I'm going to go right up on that edge. Let's go for 50, or pretty close. And for this, I'm going to select 100% opacity. Actually, you know what? Let's take this back down and work this edge first. And I'm going to select 100% opacity and use a smaller brush. Now, if I click here and then come down here and shift click, I'm going to get a straight line. And that's what I want. I want to paint out because I want to paint with black. So I'm going to come up here outside where my gradient, I know where my gradient starts. And I'm going to click and I'm going to come all the way down. Whoops. I think sometimes I get a little too fast for myself. So click, hold the space bar down, come all the way down here. And I'm going to come right up against the edge of the building and hold the shift key and click again, and you can see what I get. It's exactly what I want. So I'm going to reduce the size of my brush even more and click on this area here, and then down here, shift click, and that's perfect. So that's really exactly what I want. So that shadow's not affected by my light now. Absolutely perfect. Looking pretty good. So I can reduce the effect of this, but I kind of like it where it's at. Let's just leave it there. And now I want to paint in a little bit of detail back into this area because it's a little too dark. So let's again zoom in here. And I'm going to move up to the bottom of my image. And I know I've got bushes and stuff down here. So I'm going to click on my dark layer because that's where I want to paint. And I want a really, really soft brush now. And I'm not going to paint it 100%. We're just going to paint it about like 25. And I'll increase the size of my brush. And so just with some really subtle brush strokes here, just bringing back some of this detail, just a little bit. I'm going to bring back a little bit of this. It's a little too much. So let's change our opacity to, minus 17 or so, or 17 or so. Just bring back a little bit of that. I'm going to just darken that back up. And I'm going to come back out here now and paint out again and reduce the opacity of my brush even more, just about 6. And I just want to be really subtle about bringing in some of this detail here, like those bushes, right? A little bit of that, a little there. Getting a little carried away there, so it's got to kind of balance this stuff out a little bit. I don't want to get too, I want texture, not a bright spot. All right. So that looks pretty good. I'm liking that. So now I brought some of that detail back in. And I'm liking the way my light looks. Now I told you we were going to add some color back into this, so let's do that. I can do that simply by making a copy of my original layer that's got the color in it. And I'm going to drag it to the top of my layer stack. And I'm just going to change the blend mode to color. So what I've done is taken the color from this layer and applied it to the tone that I've built down here. So let's take this into effects now and finish it off. So let's call for another stamp. And then we're going to take this over after I make it into a smart layer, back into effects. So I'm going to add another filter to this. And what I want is the tone enhancer. And once again, I'm really interested in the curves. I want to add some mid-tone pop to this. But again, I'm going to do it by hand. And I'm going to pull this down and open up the highlights. I love this double band of light here. Now, obviously, that's way too much contrast. But I've got these tonal protections up at the top of my filter. And if I tell it to protect the highlights and protect the shadows, what I really get is just some mid-tone pop. And that's exactly what I want. So we'll add one more filter to this. And I know that a lot of people like the big softy. Not really a fan. I'm going to use the edges vignette and feather it out all the way and increase the size a little bit, increase the roundness, but I'm going to brighten it up so it's just a hint. Just a hint. Might even make that a little bigger. And I think I'll probably put a mask on here and bring back some of the stuff that's in the bottom here. And I'm going to do that by zooming out, actually. And I'm going to grab a brush, just my brush, black. Make sure that perfect brush is off. I want to paint out, nice and feathered. Size, it's going to have to be bigger than that. So we're going to make this brush significantly bigger. And I'm going to paint it about 30% opacity. And I'm just going to click here. And click here. And that's it. So I'm going to say that I'm done. And we're back out into layers, and here's our finished photo. So let's take a look at where we started. That's where we started. And we made something that's got some drama to it. So what we did was we converted the image to black and white. And then we fixed the sky by adding some contrast to the sky. We added some darkening to the bottom of the image, a streak of light across the center of the image, brought some color back from the original layer and then took it into effects and finished it off with some mid-tone contrast and a vignette. So I hope you had as much fun working on this file with me as I had making it. This is Jim Welninski for On1. See you next time.